Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this evening's talk, From Separation to Oneness. My name is Nina Buchanan, and I've been a student of the Brahma Kumaris for the past 24 years. And it's my pleasure to be given this opportunity to explore for myself an extremely important aspect of life and the way we live it in today's world. So in talking about the topic, I want to begin by saying that on one hand, we seem to be making progress, particularly in the area of technology. So technology has brought us together as a human global family. And on the other hand, there are numerous contrasting signs that the world has become more divided. And as individuals, we create our reality, that is what goes on in our minds, create the world around us. And this understanding reinforces to us that our inner processes create the reality we live in, and that conflict and separation start within the mind. Each person is a kind of world within themselves, and so we have 7 billion minds, all of which is in conflict, and that makes up the kind of world we live in today. The result of separation from self and separation from others. So just to look at the context a bit more, so in a world of opposites, separation, oneness, good, bad, right, wrong, in a world of opposites, separation and oneness are opposite sides of the same coin. And it's important to remember that the coin cannot exist without the two sides. The habitat, the home of separation, is like it's in a darkened room, and light extinguishes the dark by simply shining light into it. And the same is also true. The same principles, for example, applies for oneness, whose habitat is in a room of light. Darkness blocks out the light. So separation and oneness cannot live in the same room. They have they're from two different places, two different habitats. However, within our inner worlds, we can choose to change the coin, which represents the world of opposites, and thereby influence a change to oneness in the outer world. So whatever it is that is happening within me, that's what is happening outside. That's what I am contributing to that pool of awareness, of consciousness. So I just want to touch on the root cause of separation. So the root cause of separation is that we've lost the awareness of our eternal self, that part of us that lives in the light. We've moved out of the room filled with light and now live in that darkened room, which is in itself a traumatic experience because we've moved away from self and gradually kind of drifted into a deep sleep in this darkened room where we experience pain, conflict, sorrow, and confusion. For example, when the baby who is adopted doesn't know or told about his or her birth parents, it can cause a feeling of dislocation. There tends to be a sense of not belonging, which is separation in itself. And the same is true for all of us. We think we are bodies. We don't understand that it's that part of ourselves that we can't see who the true self is. So we've kind of taken on a different identity, just like the adopted child who has no awareness of their birth family and birth parents and family roots. So I was watching a video clip of a toddler who was born into a poor background, large family, barely surviving, and it turned out that the toddler was stolen from her parent family and sold to a wealthy family in the US, where she was loved and cared for in every way that materially that where it wouldn't be possible in rural China. However, when the child could barely speak, she began to talk about her parents and siblings with so much love that her adopted parents decided it was important to investigate her family roots and discovered that the child was stolen and sold to them illegally. So the family did the right thing, and the video actually showed the child being returned to her family and who were extremely happy to have her back. And not only that, but the two families bonded as a result of the reunion. And I would imagine there kind of will have been made a kind of lifelong bond between the US family and that child. Now, separation can trigger all types of negative conditions. And the one I would like to really focus on this evening is shame being the main kind of overriding emotion that keeps separation from self intact. So, what is shame? Shame for me is an overwhelming negative emotion that makes us feel deeply imperfect, lacking any self-worth. Shame is the opposite of self-worth, and self-worth includes a positive self-image such as dignity, self-respect, self-esteem, and self-confidence. And these are prerequisites in having a sense of value as a person with the right to be here on this planet and just be who you are. When we're ashamed, we are separate from ourselves internally. We blame ourselves for events that cause our lives to spiral out of control. And because we are social as human beings, not having a sense of belonging is indeed separation and shame, which plays an important role in holding in place that feeling of separation, that feeling of isolation, that feeling of dislocation. It's like shame holds us to ransom, keeping us in that darkened room of separation. It brings up fear of being our true self, keeping the authentic self locked away in the darkened room where separation and fear kind of navigates the life of the individual, always with that feeling of not being good enough. So, for example, if I don't really know myself, I'm separate from myself. And if I'm separate from myself, I cannot be at one with myself, and therefore cannot be at one with others. As such, a vicious circle has been created, and it's like I will have found myself in a kind of cul-de-sac, not being able to get out of that cul-de-sac because I'm trapped. That's what a vicious circle is. So on the other hand, oneness means knowing myself, like the child knowing her roots and being happy, going back to her family despite the life of poverty that she was born into. So what are the ingredients of experiencing inner harmony? A feeling of being at one with self, feeling great no matter what. So that brings me to ask myself a question. So what does developing love for the self require? What does developing love require? What do I need to do? So there are two things that I'm flagging up here in response to this question. The first is self-knowledge. It's like, if I'm in love with someone, if I like someone, the prerequisite for liking someone or being in love with someone is being able to know them, isn't it? Know something about them. So self-knowledge is an important factor in being able to really be able to develop that relationship with myself, knowing who I am, truly am. Most people are unable to appreciate the importance of having a relationship with themselves as a route to achieving success or oneness within. So recently, whilst I was giving a talk on loving the self, someone said to me, how can I love myself? This is narcissistic. It's being vain and egotistical. And I was surprised on one hand, and on the other hand, I wasn't surprised, because this is what we are taught by social institutions in a society that is based on values of divide and rule. Unfortunately, this is what the world of better and lesser than, and richer and poorer than is built on. However, developing love for the self is the only way to move from separation to oneness. It cannot be the other way around. We cannot become one with others or become one with the world unless we visit that silent place of the one within and begin to enjoy that part of who I really am. Developing love for self also needs, in addition to knowing the self, self-knowledge, self-acceptance. So I get to know myself. And of course, as I get to know myself, it's not just the good things about myself that's coming into my awareness. It's those things that I'm not necessarily happy about or, proud of. So self-acceptance, so just as we are educated not to know and to love ourselves, intrinsic in this non-relationship with self, we don't accept ourselves. Just as we blame, just as we judge, just as we shame ourselves, we do the same to others. And this kind of attitude based on lack of self-knowledge and self-acceptance means that we are strangers to ourselves, with others, and with the world. So we lock ourselves. We are locked in a prison of separation. We are locked in a prison of self-separation in that darkened room when we can accept ourselves no matter what. We begin to climb the stairs of self-acceptance. So it means that when I'm out of balance, to bring myself back into alignment, it's important to affirm. And this is what I practice myself when I'm really feeling very bad about making a mistake, or I feel bad about, really tripping up in some way, shape, or form. I just repeat inwardly to myself, I am perfect as I can be right here and now, and there is room to progress. I'm perfect as I can be right here and now, and there is room to progress. I'm not saying that I am perfect and there's nothing to be done about that. I'm saying, I am capable of making mistakes. I'm human. Because if I don't create that space where I can come back into alignment, then I will not be able to move on. I will still be trapped in that darkened room of separation. So I accept myself, warts and all. I accept myself, warts and all. And if I don't do that, there's no way that I will achieve inner harmony. I'm in that zone of separation. So how can we further work on the inner level to move from separation to inner oneness? How can we do that? So what I want to do is, as a prelude to this answer, this question, I'd like to share something about a video clip I recently viewed and which had a major impact on me in terms of my own self-awareness and how I could help other people to really leave that darkened room. So the title, you might want to take this down, it's called, the title of the video, and it's on YouTube, it's called Step Inside the Circle. Step Inside the Circle. And the video clip gives an idea of what we need to do on an individual level as a global family. So this is the context, this is the scenario. So the video shows 235 male inmates in a maximum security prison in California, all dressed in their prison uniforms, and they're standing in a huge circle. And in this circle, there's a lot of space between them where you could fit at least 1.5 other person. So they weren't really bunched up together. They were standing with a lot of space between them. And they were standing in the blazing sun in this massive prison courtyard. And in the middle of the circle was a slightly built woman, and she had a loudspeaker. And her opening statement was, "We are here to do the compassion trauma circle. Is everyone ready to face their past with compassion? Are you ready?" And they all answered yes in unison. Then she spoke firmly, but with a depth of compassion. And at the end of each sentence, she would instruct them or ask them to step inside the circle, at which point the men would slowly edge their way inside the circle. Then she began with the statements and instructions, and I'm going to just tell you what the statements were. So the statements were, so that's one. She said, whilst you were growing up during your first 18 years of life, has a parent or older person in your household very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you. And then she says, step inside the circle. And you could see slowly these inmates, they started moving closer into the circle. And then the next question was, or statement, she said, if a parent or other adult in your household often or very often grabbed, pushed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. And of course, you could see the inmates moving closer into the circle. You could see their faces. You could see the hesitancy in the steps. You could see that some of them were like, the expressions on their faces were like they'd gone back to their childhood to relive something that they experienced that caused them trauma, shame, and separation. And then she went on further to say, if a parent or adult person in your household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. And for the third time, you could see those boots moving closer into the circle. And you could see the hesitancy and the expressions on their faces as they move into the circle. And then she then said, if you felt that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, step inside the circle. Again, for the fourth time, the inmates were moving closer. Some were further into the circle than others, but they were moving, all moving in the right direction. And then she continued with another statement, and she said, if your family lived in extreme poverty, step inside the circle. And again, you could see the circle was getting smaller and more of a kind of cluster was being formed as those inmates moved closer together. So by this time, the large circle became a much smaller circle, at which stage she said firmly and compassionately, and she repeated these statements 3 times further. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. And they moved. And the circle became a kind of a cluster of 235 inmates, a cluster of 235 inmates. And then the facilitator asked them to repeat after her, there is no shame. 3 times, there is no shame. There is no shame. And you could hear these voices speaking, there is no shame. Now, for me, the huge circle was symbolic of separation when they were in that huge circle. And the creation of the cluster, for me, is symbolic of oneness on so many different levels. It's really difficult to kind of identify those different levels at this point, given that we don't have a lot of time. So the video ended with a scene in a room where some of the inmates were sharing with the facilitator. And to quote some of the things they shared, I really had to just kind of make a note of some of the things because they're so impacting. So first, the facilitator shared, and she said, as a young girl, I was verbally and physically abused. She said, my father was an alcoholic, and my mother was a rageaholic. Rageaholic means a mother. She raged. She was very angry. And then she said, I sold drugs. I drove whilst I was drunk. I was a juvenile delinquent. And then she said, the only difference is that I didn't go to prison. My story is similar to yours. I see myself in each of you. And of course, the inmates followed suit and they started sharing things like, once shared, I am a traumatized child raised by a traumatized child. My mother was traumatized as well as her parents. So he's actually talking about how, patterns of behaviors and emotions are handed down from one generation to the next. Another said, we weren't born being evil people. Another said, our traumas keep us separated. The prison, which is an institution, kept us separated. The circle helped us come together. And then the same person continues, when we yelled out, there is no shame, it gave me a sense of freedom. For me, that was him saying, I was coming back to oneness. Absolutely beautiful. Another said, to step inside the circle reminds us that we are part of humanity, and that we were experiencing being loved for the first time. Beautiful. And for me, just going back to my observations of having watched the video, each time I watch this clip, I feel really humble and really full of admiration. There's never a time when I watch it without welling up inside. Those inmates, they showed enormous courage in expressing their power to face themselves. An example for us all to follow in being the change without the shame, being the change to oneness without the shame. There is no shame. So for me, it's an excellent way of calling out shame whose habitat is in the darkness and where it hides from the light when it cannot be seen. When we shine the light on shame in the same way those inmates did, shame, which is ego, it shrivels up, it disintegrates, and it transforms itself into a kind of like a chrysalis, from a chrysalis to a butterfly, transforming itself from shame into self-worth. So when we become one with ourselves as individuals in this way, we are creating the foundation for universal oneness as a human global family. By stepping into the circle, each individual was taking responsibility. They were taking responsibility for the part they played in the game of creating separation or oneness. We are all subject to playing a part, and it all depends on where our awareness is. If we have experienced a lot of trauma, if we've not had self-knowledge, then we cannot accept the self, and it means we don't know ourselves. It's like the child who is adopted from birth and taken away from his or her cultural heritage and put into a different context. And unless they're told about the background, then they will continue to have that sense of not belonging. So in that situation, each individual inmate, they took responsibility for the part they played in the game of creating separation or oneness, which makes considerable sense, since in order to build oneness in the outer world, we need to do so within ourselves. An act of helping myself is an act of helping myself in order to help others. In other words, when I put my life jacket on, when I put my seat belt on first, I'm then more capable to help others. So, based on my own spiritual journey, the film, The Wisdom of Trauma, which is made by the same person who made the video Step Inside the Circle, and directed by this person called Gabor Mate, makes perfect sense to me. It's the same as saying that experience is the greatest teacher. So whatever trauma I experienced on my journey that caused me to experience separation, isolation, that has been pivotal to my transformation, in that healing can only take place when I choose to look separation in the face, like those inmates and the instructor did. So they had to really be present to what the instructor was actually saying to them. And it's almost as if she was directing them to go back to those experiences that caused them to feel pain, to cause them to feel hurt, but in a way that is really detached, and take ownership for themselves. So for me, it means going back to the place and time when the experience occurred. It means feeling the emotional pain in such a detached way that I'm no longer, for example, manipulated by shame. And the trauma I experienced, I can look it in the face and bring it into the light and transform it into self-worth. So it's almost as if I am dismantling that darkened room. I'm using it less, and I'm using that room filled with light on a regular basis. So a good example to use in shifting from separation to oneness is shifting from victim consciousness to being a survivor. Most of us, all of us, will have experienced being a victim, even if it's in a mild way. And having to transcend that feeling of victim that's held us to ransom, that's kept us locked inside that darkened room. So many of us will have learned through discomfort what it's like to be a victim. And within that experience, there are jewels. In other words, wisdom that I've unearthed for myself that I can use in my journey in life. And that keeps me protected, keeps me safe, and keeps me feeling content. So as a result of my own journey, as I mentioned, I've been practicing meditation for the past 24 years. And as a result of that, I've been able to reflect on some of the identities that I've taken on that are synonymous to that darkened room. And I can say with a lot of conviction that I have become a seeker of truth, finding love within and being able to shine the light of self-knowledge and self-understanding that removes the darkness. So for me, this in itself is an identity shift, shifting my awareness of feeling separate to an awareness of being at one with self and one with others. So healing trauma, healing shame, healing separation requires this kind of identity shift, which is what we saw, what I saw in the video, and what I tried to explain that occurred in the video. I hope it was vivid enough for you to get a real good picture as to what the video was about. And when you watch it, you will see for yourself. So I would like to do quite a lengthy guided reflection. And after that, if there is any more time, then I can actually continue with the talk. So you will hear some background music as I begin to speak. And I'd like you to make yourselves comfortable. So this guided meditation is entitled Letting Go of Shame, Letting Go of Separation, and Stepping into Oneness. So I would like to invite you to begin to make yourselves comfortable and focus your attention on your breathing. And as you focus your attention on your breathing, just allow the breath to take your focus away from the outside to the inside, within you, within that lightened room I spoke about. The breath is the vehicle. that takes you away from the world of distraction into that silent space where you can reflect and learn about how to navigate yourself through life away from the challenges that being in the awareness of separation brings. So as you breathe, imagine that you are sitting beside a fast flowing river on a beautiful sunny day. You feel safe, you feel contented, you feel strong. And imagine that you are sitting with a wise and supportive being. You feel safe and supported in the presence of this being because deep down you know in your heart that this being has only your best interest at heart and is there especially to cater for your needs. Whatever the obstacles, whatever the challenges. Breathe. Now, imagine a small boat tied to the bank of the river near you, and in this boat, where you can easily reach is an empty box, and the box is open. It's small, it's empty, and it's open. And as you continue to focus your attention on your breathing, hold those centered feelings of positivity, of self-worth and well-being, and lightly bring to mind in observer mode something that you're ashamed of. Represent it in whatever way you wish. As a small object on the ground in front of you. Imagine that the being is telling you, or that you are telling the being some of the many causes of the circumstances that led to that thing that you are ashamed of. You don't need the whole story, a feeling, a thought, or an imagery in your mind can summarize the heart of the matter. And with that summary of the causes of the shame, allow allow yourself to feel a sense of release as the shame begins to recede within you into the background of your mind. So using your power of imagination, bow to the object representing the shame. Simply bow to it and acknowledge it. Thank it for allowing you to find your self-worth, which was hidden beneath the blanket of shame and separation. And for a moment, become so present and allow those feelings of self-worth, dignity, self-respect to permeate your being, your awareness as you experience a feeling of coming home to self. Now, just hold those feelings for a while longer. As you breathe in the feeling, the awareness of coming home to self, it's like you're being massaged. It's like this being is saying to you, it's okay. Everything is all right. Now, with the awareness of loving detachment, you can see it for what it is, but it no longer is holding you to ransom. You are detached. So bring your attention to the object on the ground and imagine yourself holding it in your palm now. Then slowly and gently pick up the box from the ground. Put the object into the box. Close the box. And holding the box in your palm, and again using your power of imagination and visualization, imagine the box transforming into a beautiful butterfly and gradually drifting off into the atmosphere. And as you bid it farewell, continue to feel that sense of gratitude for making this journey inwards. You've made that journey inwards to your home, away from separation to oneness. And slowly begin to prepare yourself to return to outer consciousness. And take with you the memory of this experience to support you in your practice from separation to oneness and perfection. Om means I am. Shanti means peace. So this guided meditation is really very much giving us the method of how we can become the change, how we can move from separation to oneness, how we can change our inner worlds if we practice to achieve the things that we wish to achieve. It could mean that I want to change the kinds of friendship group that I have in the past. And when I do that, when I begin to practice oneness through regular meditation, really enjoying the self, accepting the self, understanding the self, then naturally I will gravitate to the kinds of circumstances, the friendship group that will help me to continue on my journey from separation to oneness. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope you have taken away something valuable from this talk this evening. Om Shanti.